Albany Sher was born on June 6th, 1979, in Pineville, Kentucky. Her parents, Stephen and Jacqueline, got divorced when Shanda was just a child. She was best friends with her mom, and she was very close with her father and her stepmother, Sharon. Shanda was reportedly the kind of girl everyone wanted to be friends with. She was very bubbly, she was outgoing, and just so much fun to be around. At school, she was a cheerleader. She also played volleyball. She was smart and did very well in school. In June of 1991, around Shanda's 12th birthday, she and her mom moved to New Albany, Indiana, so that Shanda could see her father more often. Shanda started school at Hazelwood Middle School, and early on in the school year, she got into a fight with a 14-year-old Amanda Hevron. The two ended up in detention together, where they resolved their issues and eventually became friends. Jackie, Shanda's mother, was unsettled by this new friendship, however. Since it had begun, she had noticed Shanda's grades were slipping, and she was beginning to get in more and more trouble. The friendship soon developed into more than a friendship, and the girls began exchanging love letters. In October, they attended a school dance where they encountered Amanda's ex-girlfriend, 16-year-old Melinda Lovelace. The sight of Amanda and Shanda together made Melinda furious. At the dance, Melinda tried to fight Shanda, but Amanda stepped in between and tried to stop it. In the weeks following, Melinda threatened Shanda in public and began writing letters to Amanda saying she wanted Shanda dead. On discovering Amanda's letters to Shanda, many of which were sexually explicit in nature, Jackie and Stephen decided that they wanted to have Shanda transferred to a different school nearby. By the end of November, Shanda had enrolled in Our Lady of Perpetual Help Catholic School. Shanda and Amanda had not broken up when Shanda transferred schools. Amanda continued writing these love letters to Shanda and called her at home. Shanda, however, was a little distracted at her new school and was not as responsive to Amanda's love letters as Amanda wanted her to be. For most high school students, school life is your whole world. Like, these teenagers don't really have a world outside of school. The people that they met in school played central roles in their lives. And for many, high school is where you experience your first relationship and make friends that you think will be close to you forever. However, a lot of the time when you look back on your high school days, experiences that seemed like the end of the world were like tiny in comparison to the things you've gone through now. So this is where our story takes a very dark turn. What appeared to be kind of just a jealous lover's spat in the last section spiraled into something more sinister and malicious. It would result in an evil act that would massively alter the lives of 4 people and end the life of another. So I'm going to talk about was, and he had been a Vietnam vet who had trouble holding down work. Any money he did earn went towards motorcycles and guns. He was reportedly very violent, verbally abusive, a drunk, and a pervert. Larry and Melinda's mother had like an open relationship, or rather, Larry let his friends borrow his wife for sex. The two would regularly engage in orgies with men and women that Larry would pick up in bars. Larry violently beat and raped his wife while the couple's 3 daughters were in the home. He once beat Marjorie so badly that she was hospitalized, and this abuse drove her to attempt suicide multiple times. Larry also likely subjected his daughters to sexual abuse, but the extent of this is unclear. There are reports that he molested his daughters and nieces when they were children, and Melinda shared a bed with her father until she was 14 years old. Marjorie and Larry later divorced when Melinda was 14. Larry moved to Florida, and after that, he had very little, if any, contact with his family. Melinda struggled with depression and would regularly get into fights, both of which were largely caused by her difficult home life. This affected her schoolwork and resulted in her having to repeat a year of school. Melinda was open about her lesbian orientation, which was rare for this small town in Indiana in the 1990s. Okay, another girl we're going to talk about is Lori Tackett, who is 15 years old. Lori was from Madison, Indiana, about 50 miles away. She came from a very strict fundamentalist Christian household, mainly driven by her mother. Her father worked in a factory, and Lori's parents were both abusive, and social services had been called in to investigate them on several occasions. Lori was fascinated by paranormal activity and vampirism. Early in 1991, at the age of 16, Lori began to self-harm, and this ended up with her having several hospital stays. She was admitted to a psychiatric ward and diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. In September of 1991, Lori dropped out of high school. Then, Lori meets Melinda and the two become friends. By the end of the year, Lori was spending most of her time with Melinda and rarely was going home. Hope Ripley is another main character in this story, and she was 15 years old at the time. She was also from Madison, and she was friends with Lori, although her parents didn't like Hope spending time with Lori. Hope and Tony had been very close since they were young, and Tony is the next one we'll talk about. And Hope was also known to engage in self-harm. Tony Lawrence is also 15, and Tony was born and raised in Madison. She was good friends with Hope, but she didn't really know the other girls in this story. Some reports state that Tony was raped when she was 14, but exterior and showed little emotion. Tony got very unsettling vibes from Lori, like she just was instantly uncomfortable in the presence of this girl. Lori asked Hope, "Did you tell her yet?" To which Hope replied, "Tell her what?" And then she said, "We're going to kill a girl tonight." Tony didn't know what to think, but she thought this had to be some sort of twisted joke. Before heading to the concert, Lori drove to New Albany to pick up Melinda. Hope didn't know Melinda well, and Tony had never met her. Melinda was beautiful and glamorous, and she was so excited to see all of these girls. Carrying a large kitchen knife with her, she got in the car and told Hope and Tony that she wanted to scare a girl, Shanda, because she was trying to be like her and she had stolen her girlfriend. So Lori, Hope, and Tony, who had never met Shanda before, are like all in on this, whatever this is going to be. The four arrived at about 8 p.m. at Shanda's home, and Melinda hid on the floor of the car. She knew that if Shanda saw her, she would get scared and she wouldn't come with them. Lori and Melinda told Hope and Tony to knock on Shanda's door and ask them to come with them to go to Amanda's house. Shanda had never seen these girls before, but she did want to see Amanda, so she told them to come back at midnight once her parents were asleep so she could sneak out. Hope and Tony returned to the car, and they end up driving to this rock concert. At around 12 a.m., they drove back to Shanda's house. On the way, Melinda expressed how excited she was to kill Shanda, but also said she just wanted to scare her. Hope and Tony didn't believe that Melinda actually planned on killing someone that night, but Tony was becoming increasingly concerned with this killing talk. She refused to go to the door with Hope to get Shanda to come with them. So Hope comes back with Shanda, and they get in the car and they start talking about Amanda. Hope explained that Amanda was waiting for them at Witch's Castle. Melinda then jumped up behind Shanda, grabbed her hair, and put the blunt end of the knife to her throat. Shanda screamed and pleaded with Melinda not to hurt her, and Melinda yelled, "Shut up, bitch," and then proceeded to question Shanda about her sexual relationship with Amanda. At Witch's Castle, Melinda and Lori tied Shanda up. Lori scared Shanda by telling her that she knew that this place was already full of dead people. Shanda was terrified and was begging to just go home. Lori lit a t-shirt with a smiley face on fire with her lighter and taunted Shanda, saying soon that would be her. They then left Witch's Castle with Shanda, looking for an open gas station. Shanda told them about one that was kind of nearby her house. They went there, but Lori knew Shanda was near her home. She might try to get away or call for help, so they covered her with a blanket. They drove around for some time, and then they ended up in the woods not far from where Lori lived. Here, the torture began. Lori and Melinda punched and kicked Shanda and tried to cut her throat with a knife, but this knife wasn't sharp enough. They used it to stab her chest and abdomen. Hope and Terry stayed in the car, although Hope got out of the car briefly to help hold Shanda down. Melinda and Lori strangled Shanda with a rope until she passed out. Then they put her in the trunk and drove back to Lori's house. They told Hope and Tony that Shanda was dead. So when Lori realizes that Shanda was making noises, she gets out and goes to the back of the car and begins stabbing her repeatedly until she stops making noises. Melinda and Lori then went driving in the countryside, leaving Hope and Tony at Lori's house. Whenever Shanda made a noise, Lori would go back into the trunk, where she would stab her with a knife or beat her with a tire iron. It is unclear how long they were out driving for. They returned to Lori's house and picked up Hope and Tony, and then they went back to the woods. Lori and Melinda wanted to show Hope and Tony what they had done to Shanda, but Tony refused to look. The three girls looked, and Hope sprayed Shanda with Windex. She said, "You're not looking so hot now, are you?" At a gas station, Tony bought a large bottle of Pepsi to drink, but Lori grabbed it, emptied it, and proceeded to fill it up with gasoline. They drove north and ended up on Lemon Road, which is this country road that's just surrounded by fields. Lori and Hope wrapped Shanda, who was still alive after all of this torture, in a blanket and carried her to the edge of the fields, still in view of the road. Lori poured the gas from the Pepsi bottle on Shanda and set her on fire. The four girls then left and went to eat at McDonald's. Tony was hysterical and used a payphone to call a friend and tell her about what had just happened, about the murder. Melinda and Lori decided Tony needed to go home. She was being hysterical. So they dropped Tony and Hope off at their homes, and Melinda gets in touch with Amanda and told her that Shanda was dead. But Amanda doesn't believe her and ends up agreeing to meet her ex-girlfriend later. So Lori and Melinda then go pick up Amanda, and then they go back to Melinda's house. Once in the house, Melinda cried hysterically, telling Amanda what they had done to Shanda. But Amanda still did not believe them. She thought they were just trying to scare her. And this changed when they showed her the trunk of Lori's car, which was covered in blood, and there were bloody handprints and fingerprints and hair, and even Shanda's socks were still there. Amanda is horrified by this, and she demands to be taken home. Around the time that the girls were at McDonald's, remember, they had killed her and then they had all gone for food. Brothers Don and Ralph Foley were out hunting for quail. They made their way past Jefferson Proving Ground, driving about 8 miles on a country road. There they spot this large, dark-colored object on the side of the road. As they got Sheriff Buck Shipley. Detective Steve Harry and forensic expert Sergeant Curtis Wells arrive around 1 p.m. The men could not believe this horrifying sight. The girl's body had been burned beyond recognition, posed in a sexual manner, and Wells was convinced she had likely been sodomized. In the meantime, Steve, Shanda's father, wakes up and he notices Shanda is not in her room, but he doesn't really think much of it. He assumes maybe she's sleeping in the living room in the basement. But when he realizes she isn't there, he begins to worry and he starts calling all of her friends. And then his ex-wife Jackie saying, I can't find Shanda, I have no idea where she is. Jackie came over and together they pretty quickly file a missing persons report. After that, Shanda's parents and stepmother began just searching everywhere for Shanda. At around 8:20 p.m., a hysterical Tony walks into the police department accompanied by her father. She needs to tell police what happened, and she just kind of talks as fast as she can, trying to get it all out. She told them about the plan to go to the concert with Lori and Hope, but how they ended up picking up Leslie's friend Melinda. She knew the girl's name was Shanda, and she knew that she was 12 or 13, but she was so hysterical she couldn't remember exact times of things, but she did remember locations. She remembered they had gone to Witch's Castle. She remembered they had been at the woods. They had been at Lori's house. She said Lori and Melinda were beating Shanda in the trunk of her car. She told them about going to the gas station and filling up the Pepsi bottle with gas. Now Tony luckily somehow remembered Shanda's address, or at least how to get to the home. So police contact Wells to see if there is a missing persons report that had been filed at that address. And there had been one. 12-year-old Shanda had been reported missing. The description of Shanda in the missing persons report matched the body that had been found earlier that day. Dental records were used to confirm the identity, and it was positively ID'd as Shanda. On January 12th, 1992, Lori and Melinda were arrested. All four of these girls ended up being arrested and charged as adults. They each accepted plea bargains to avoid the death penalty. Lori and Melinda were both sentenced to 60 years in Indiana women's prison. On appeal in 2004, Hope's sentence was reduced from 60 years to 35. Tony pled guilty to one charge of criminal confinement and was sentenced to a maximum of 20 years. Completely heartbroken by the murder of his daughter, Steve couldn't go on. He found his only escape in drinking and died of alcohol abuse in 2005 at the age of 53. During Melinda's sentencing hearing, the horrific abuse her father, Larry Lovelace, had subjected to her came into light. In February of 1993, he was charged with rape, sodomy, sexual battery, and he was arrested. He spent 2 years in prison awaiting trial. However, due to the statute of limitations, which was 5 years in Indiana, and given that the majority of these particular similar crimes had occurred like 25 years before. The judge had all of these charges dropped except for one sexual battery charge, which Larry pleaded guilty to. He received a sentence of time served and was released in June of 1995. While in prison, Melinda became involved in training dogs, and she was kind of known for her training for the ICAN, which is the Indiana Canine Assistance Dogs program, and she was even sought out for help with dogs that were having a little bit harder time being trained. Charlie Petiso, a burn victim who breeds service dogs for ICANN, got in touch with Shanda's mother about Melinda, and together they watched footage of Melinda training a dog in prison. On watching this footage, Jackie said, "Melinda was sincere. She was compassionate. I think the ICANN program allows her to have something in her life where she can show love, and there's never betrayal on the other side." In 2012, Jackie made an unexpected decision to donate a puppy named Angel in honor of Shanda for Melinda to train in ICANN. So that was super big of her mother. I don't know that I could have done that. Tony was released in prison in 2000 after serving 8 years. Hope was released on parole in 2006, having served 14 years. On the 26th anniversary of Shanda's murder, January 11th, 2018, Lori was released on parole. Melinda was released in September of 2019. So this is the horrific murder of Shanda. Honestly, I've covered a couple cases where teenage girls murder each other, and it never gets easier to understand. I do, have some compassion for these girls. I think they all came from really toxic, abusive backgrounds, but that in no way gives them the right to take away the life of another human. And so